What's going on, guys? In this build, it is a Conjuration Sorceress for Diablo 4. I'm currently level 98, as you can see, and I've already cleared several Tier 100 dungeons. And I really think that this class is strong enough, this build in particular is strong enough, to probably do this at level 90. So it's got the damage, it's all about survivability with the Sorceress, but the idea was, when I started a character in Season 1 for Diablo 4, everybody was telling me Sorceress sucks, Sorceress is bad, Sorceress F-class, terrible tier, can't do it. And the whole goal was to prove that maybe the class still has what it takes to get in there. And sure enough, it does. So we're going to walk through the skills, the Paragon board, the itemization, options for gear where it makes sense. And yeah, let's figure out what this class has got for you. Maybe you give it a whirl, right? I should say I've tried Chain Lightning. I have not tried Ice Shards or Blizzard because I know those already are like S tier. They're very strong. They're very easy to play. They're clean. This is something a little bit off meta just to see what happened. And my God, was I ever surprised. So enough of that. Let's hop in the video. So starting off, let's go over the skill tree. 2 points in a Firebolt, because you have to have 2 points in a basic skill to access your core skills. And when we get to core skills, we're going to put 5 points in a Frozen Orb. We then put 1 point into Enhanced Frozen Orb and 1 point into Greater Frozen Orb. Because Frozen Orb's explosion is a 30% chance to make all enemies hit vulnerable for 2 seconds, and Frozen Orb itself always makes frozen enemies vulnerable. Moving on, we're going to look into our defensive skills. I've got 2 points into Elemental Attunement. Critical strikes have a 10% chance to reset the cooldown of one of your defensive skills. This can only happen 1 every 10 seconds. And we got 1 free point from our chest, which is Raiment of the Infinite at the moment. And if you don't have Raiment, you won't get the extra point here. We have 1 point into Teleport, 1 point into Enhanced Teleport, 1 point into Shimmering Teleport. We then put 1 point into Ice Armor. 1 point goes into Frost Nova, 1 point Enhanced Frost Nova, 1 point into Mystical Frost Nova. It makes enemies vulnerable for 4 seconds, and it's increased to 6 seconds against bosses. So that's how we apply vulnerable on demand whenever we want it. We just hit them with a Frost Nova. Moving on into our Conjuration skill. This is where we live. We're a Conjuration Sorceress, right? So we put all 5 points into Hydra. Ultimately, mine's level 12 at the moment. 1 point into Enhanced Hydra, 1 point into Summoned Hydra. Then we have 1 point into Ice Blades, 1 point into Enhanced Ice Blades, 1 point Summoned Ice Blades. Okay? Then we have 1 point into Lightning Spear, 1 point into Enhanced Lightning Spear, and 1 point into Invoked Lightning Spear. And then we put 3 points into Conjuration Mastery, and in my gear, you're going to see that I get +3 to this Conjuration Mastery. Okay, so that's why it's 6 out of 3. I put 1 point to Align the Elements. I do max out Mana Shield, 3 points in that, and 3 points in Protection. Moving on into our Mastery skill tree, I've got 3 points into Icy Veil, because our barriers now have 15% increased duration. We have 3 points into Inner Flames, 3 points into Devouring Blaze. I then move into the ultimate skill section, and I've got 1 point into Permafrost, 3 points into Icy Touch, and 3 points into Hoarfrost. Finally, moving into our key passives, I have 1 point into Shatter. So let's talk about this for just a second here. The way that Conjuration Mastery works is we're going to deal multiplicative damage for each active Conjuration. So that's going to be any summoned Ice Blades, any summoned Lightning Spear, any summoned Hydras. And the Hydras, we can't really get more than 1 unless we have the specific legendary, which we do on our glove slot in this case, but we have one that gives us the access to a second Hydra. And I should talk about the enchantment system as well. The enchantments that we're going to be using is Ice Blades enchantment. So Ice Blades cooldown is reduced by 0.5 seconds for each time it hits a vulnerable enemy, okay? And then 20% of Ice Blades cooldown reduction is applied to other skills. And then we've got Frozen Orb enchantment as well. So Frozen Orb's explosion, as we read before, has a 30% chance to make all enemies hit vulnerable for 2 seconds, and Frozen Orb always makes frozen enemies vulnerable. And so the reason that's kind of important as well is we are using the Talrasha Malignant Heart, and we're going to go right into the gear here for just a moment. So let's bring this up. And I'm going to speak to the jewelry for a second. So the legendary aspect on our necklace is Chain of Control, right? So deal 50%, up to 53% on a perfect roll, more damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen enemies. And the way that that sort of works and the way that we play is we're constantly using Frost Nova to go ahead and freeze, right? We're using Teleport with the help of Raiment of the Infinite to stun and vacuum suck things in. We're also stunning things all the time with Lightning Spear. And so Control is really, really nice because we get a 53% multiplicative damage application whenever those things are happening. It happens quite frequently. And I'm going to speak on the heart inside, okay? So the Wrathful Heart slot, which is white, it can go in any color slot, is going to be the Barber. Critical strikes and all subsequent damage within some range, 2.6 seconds in this case, is absorbed by your target, and then the absorbed damage erupts onto surrounding enemies. Stored damage is increased by 14% per second. So I'm getting 28% increased multiplied damage on this item because of this Malignant Heart. And what's neat about that is the absorb also hits the main target too, so the main target takes it, and as does everything else around it. But that thing that happens is when it's absorbing it, Talrashas, which is over here, It's our Vicious Heart, right? Deals additional multiplied damage. And I'll read Talrash's Heart. It's that gray section there. It says, for each unique element you deal damage with, you deal, in this case, 12% multiplicative damage for some amount of seconds, and that's 10. So we're actually dealing fire because of our Hydra, right there. We're dealing lightning because of our Telestomp or our Lightning Spear. And then we're dealing ice from Frozen Orb that procs off of our enchantment system. Whenever we cast a non-basic skill, we've got some % chance to launch a Frozen Orb. And that's all of our benefits that we're getting for the Talrasha multiplicative table. But there's actually a fourth one, and that is here. It's the Barber's Wrathful Heart, because the Absorb counts as shadow damage. So it's actually much more. So instead of just getting 36% multi, we're getting 48% multi, which is huge. And then the final Malignant Heart for Season of the Malignant here that we're using is the Brutal Heart, that is damage suppression. And I'll just read this, right? So we have some range. Ours is 18 at the moment. 18% of incoming damage is suppressed, and that just keeps happening, okay? When you use a defensive, subterfuge, or macabre skill, in our case it's defensive, because defensive would be teleport, defensive would be Frost Nova, defensive would also be Ice Armor, okay? Whenever we use any of those 3 skills, some amount of damage happens. So all that suppressed damage is released at 250% multiplicative damage. It explodes everywhere, dealing some amount of damage, and that's 16,970. So we're suppressing damage because that's a pain point for the Sorceress. We're taking less damage there. We're doing more damage every time we do different kinds of elemental damage, and we're doing that just easily through regular gameplay. And then all of that damage is being multiplied and exploded on in targets in the dungeon. And that is where the player power sort of relies, or is found in the class. So let's go over the gear for the build at the moment. I'm using the ever-living Primal Bassinet. So I've got max ranks of Hydra, I've got life, all stats, and cooldown reduction. You're going to want all stats. That helps you on the Paragon board later. Cooldown reduction is a no-brainer. You want that on everything, okay? And we're going to take 23% less damage from crowd-controlled enemies or vulnerable enemies. Remember, Frozen Orb will make them vulnerable. We're using rubies in all of our gear because we want HP. And currently at level 98, I've got 12,553. So that's getting there. We're getting tanky. Let's check out the chest slot. I did get lucky. I'm using Rainman of the Infinite still. It's got plus 57 to intelligence, damage to close enemies, damage to stunned enemies. It does give us that extra rank of glass cannon, which is why we have that point, which is kind of nice. And then this is what makes it so good. After using teleport, close enemies are pulled to you and stunned for some amount of time. In this case, 2.7 seconds. But teleport's cooldowns increased by 20%. Okay, big deal. It's basically another vacuum that blows things away. So the last thing the demons see is their own ring piece flying through their eyeballs, okay? It just destroys. If you can't get your hands on Rainman of the Infinite, I'd recommend looking for a chest that's got all stats, damage reduction from things that are burning, and maybe total armor %. That would be pretty good. Basically, you're looking for much more defense. If you can't play where you can teleport into stun, you might as well play to absorb the hit and stay alive. So that's what I'd recommend you do. And for the legendary aspect, you could use the Protector because that's going to give you a barrier, and you do benefit from barriers with a class like this. For the gloves, we're going to be using the Serpentine Boneweave Gauntlet. So the legendary aspect here is you may have one additional Hydra active, but Hydra's duration is reduced by 20%, or up to 10%, okay? So what you want to do for this build is maybe get ready for patch 1.1.1, because in patch 1.1.1, Hydras, this is going to change. They're going to be out longer, 20% or more, okay? So you're looking for this Serpentine. Looks like somebody joined my party, which is sweet. As for the gloves, you want max rank Frozen Orb because you are using those all the time. Whenever you cast Hydra, Frozen Orbs are being cast for free. And it's not just Hydra, but anytime you cast a non-basic skill. So you can get Frozen Orbs whenever you teleport, whenever you cast Frost Nova, whenever you're summoning Ice Blades, whenever you're conjuring those, conjuring Lightning Spear, saving yourself with defensive armor. It's all there. It's nice, okay? In addition, Hydra, like I mentioned, that's also going to let rip tons of Frozen Orb. And this glove gives a +4. Increased attack speed, increased critical strike chance, and again, I'm going for that all stats because it helps the Paragon board. But remember that also your conjurations benefit, your pets benefit from your attack speed. So the more attack speed you have, the faster your summons will also assault things, okay? Looking at the legs, we've got the Adventurer's Pants of Disobedience, one of the best, if not the best, defensive legendaries in the game. I've got maximum life, damage reduction from close, damage reduction pure, damage reduction while injured. I'm trying to get damage reduction while burning instead of injured. This way it's always happening, okay? And the injured is unfortunately a decent roll, but maybe not the worst thing when I'm about to go down. Maybe these pants save me, and you could look for something like that too. As for the boots, you could use Ghost Walkers. I'm currently using Eluding Adventurer's Boots. It gives me +4 ranks of teleport, I get movement speed after I kill an elite. I've got +4 ranks of Frost Nova, and I've also got movement speed. So instead of getting movement speed after killing an elite, it would have been nice to get all stats to assist on the Paragon board. And whenever we become injured while crowd controlled, grants you unstoppable for 4 seconds. So why not? We'll take that unstoppable so we can get the hell out of dodge and stay alive instead of just getting clapped, okay? And this effect has a 30-second cooldown, so that could roll to 20-second, which would be nice. Our one-handed weapon, we aren't using two hands, it's a one-handed weapon here. It's Wizard's Touch of Splintering Energy. So the legendary aspect here is the Lightning Spear, right? So this Lightning Spear right here has a 49 up to a 50% chance to spawn an additional Lightning Spear when you cast it. So what's choice about that is, let me bring you back over here so you can see our skill tree, right? Conjuration Mastery here is going to give us increased multiplicative damage for each conjuration we have. So if there's one Lightning Spear, that's 6%. If there's two, that's 12. So we do want to go that way to summon additional conjurations so we can do increased multiplicative damage. That's just choice, okay? Fantastic. Let's look at the offhand here. The Conceited is the legendary aspect here. Enigma Cube, critical strike chance, cooldown reduction, damage reduction from enemies that are burning, fantastic. And then Intelligence, again, you can get Intelligence or all stats because it helps on the Paragon board. Intelligence isn't the worst thing, it's our main stat. It gives us primary skill damage and then resistances to all elements, but resistances, as we know, in the game of Diablo 4 currently aren't working so good, so that's not exactly where we want to be. But Conceited says we deal increased damage while we have an active barrier. So that's kind of nice because whenever we pop a barrier, right, and you'll see in the Paragon board, we know it's like a DPS window. We do more damage, and then through the Paragon board, we're going to deal even more damage, which is kind of cool. And as for the aspects, again, control on the necklace, I've got accelerating because critical strikes with core skills, which is just Frozen Orb whenever it goes off, increase your attack speed by up to 25% for 5 seconds, and that helps all of our conjurations attack faster, so we're trying to proc that whenever we get the opportunity. And then finally, Edge Masters, skills deal up to some amount of damage based off of our available primary resource when cast. Now, this build is kind of different than other sorceresses in that it doesn't use a lot of mana frequently, so we're going to be using Edge Masters. Conjuration Sorceress is a little bit different than most other Sorceress builds that I've played because it can cast and move on. Like, you could open up a locked cage and take somebody out to help assist the progress of the dungeon while everything is still getting slaughtered off of your screen. You can place a Hydra at the edge of your screen and it shoots out to tell you where the monsters are. And so for the common gameplay, what I try to do is the following. So whenever we're getting engaged with the content, I'll try to start off by using my Lightning Spear. I'll shoot them out and they'll go ahead and seek targets if they're around. And I got 2. So I'm going to start dropping Hydras, you see? And they'll start to tell me right there, I got monsters. So I'll throw out some blades, right? I'll throw out my shield so we're popping off big damage. And what we're trying to do is just use our conjurations to dictate where the threat is and eliminate it, right? So here's a guy on top of us. So we telestomp, we freeze him, big damage, and he dies. But it's the same thing. We're going to constantly search out enemies, right? Search out enemies and kill them. And we're not even anywhere near them. So it's a very safe build in this regard. And now if you want to do massive damage, one thing we can do is the following, right? We're going to try to summon all of our conjurations right now, right? We pop our shield, we telestomp, and we just blow things away. So two Hydras go up, just like that, and we blow everything away, right? We want to summon the maximum amount of conjurations so our damage is all multiplicative. We throw in the stuff, freeze everything, and it just explodes everywhere. And the Barber is happening. You see all that immune? The Barber is happening and then exploding on all the targets around it. And that's what makes this conjuration build sort of disgusting, is that it absorbs a bunch of damage on one target, which is the burn amount of damage, and then sends it off to everything around it. So let me show you where the player power really resides within this build outside of just the spec and the gear. So I want to talk about the Paragon board for a second. We're going to start off with the Conjuration node in this case. So this is what's giving us all of our conjure damage. It's currently 158.4. Now this is my leveling build. This is not min-maxed yet. This is what I've got to get to level 98, and I will push it to 100 using this build, and you could too. It's doing just fine. So again, on our starting board, Conjure is our first glyph, okay? Conjure skills also have a 20% increased duration, so that's nice. That's Hydras, Blades, Lightning Spear, that's all out longer because of this one singular glyph. So again, if you're just kind of getting into Diablo 4, I would say get all of your glyphs to level 15 first, because that takes their radius, this big red radius, it takes it from, and I'll show you the difference, right? 3, which is just this little amount, all the way up to 4 in Conjuration. So right there. You see how it turns a little bit different? That's because the radius is bigger. At level 15, when you get this glyph up to level 15, it becomes radius 4, okay? Radius 4. And they do go all the way to 21, by the way. So some of these glyphs you'll see level 21, right? All that jazz. 21 is the highest you can get. So that's our starting board. Let's move on. The next board we're going to look at is the Elemental Summoner. Your conjuration skills have a 5% reduced cooldown or mana cost per conjuration skill you have equipped. Well, that's fantastic. And then the glyph for this one's going to be control. We'll deal increased damage to crowd-controlled enemies because they could be slowed, chilled, frozen, or stunned, right? And we'll deal 10% increased damage to slowed or chilled, or 20% increased multiplied damage if they're stunned or frozen. And we do that all the time. We stun them with Rain with the Infinite Teleport, we stun them with Lightning Spear, or we straight up freeze them with Frost Nova. So we'll take that, okay? And then the next board we're going to use here is going to be the Enchantment Master board, and the glyph is going to be Exploit. So we deal damage to vulnerable enemies, and it's increased by 1% for 6 seconds up to 10% multiplicative damage. But then we also get a flat 26.9%. So we'll take that. The next board we're going into is the Burning Instinct board. And this legendary note is gross. Your burning damage is increased by 40% of your critical strike damage, further increased by 5% for every 20 int that you have, intelligence, right? So the current bonus is 497%. That's a ton of burn damage. And when all that burn damage is happening and your barber hits the target, that's where that massive damage explosion is coming from, okay? And that's, again, that's the Burning Instinct board. And the glyph here is going to be Destruction. So we're increasing our critical strike damage by quite a bit, in this case 97%. And as you can read, critical strikes increase all damage the enemy takes from you by 2% for 10 seconds up to 12% multi. And the next board is going to be, let's see, this is the Frigid Fate board with the glyph Reinforced. So we do increased vulnerable damage, we have increased intelligence, which helps us with our main damage and our resistances. And then we're going to start looking into things like oppressive, right? And this is the way you build these boards out. So all in all, guys, this is nuts. Like, I started off with Chain Lightning. And so why would you play something like this? Like, if you don't want to just play the meta and you want to try something else with the new hearts that were out, and I want to try and see if Sorceress is still good, this is the way I went. This is how I built it. I've loved this, man. This has been so good. It's been comfortable, easy. I can engage with you guys via conversations on Twitch live, or just, you know, just relax gameplay instead of always playing on the edge. Like, can't be right in there too much, or else you might get one shot. Like, I'll tell you, like, corpse bows still ruin me, and I got to find something for that. I'm trying to get, you know, damage reduction from distant as much as maybe I can afford to, but I still lose to corpse bows like everybody else. Outside of that, I think the build's insane. And I'm going to leave you with a couple videos here just collapsing bosses, whether they're 90, 93, 93, 94, 95, 96, whatever it is. And then also a couple tier 100 clears just to show you at 98 that it was possible. And I truthfully think we could have done it at 90. So after that's done, we'll go ahead and take Echo of Lilith out for a little bit of a spin and see if we can't throw her down with the build like this too. That'd be kind of interesting. So again, feel free to leave any comments in the description. I read them all. And if there's any questions you have that I didn't cover and maybe you need an answer there, let me know. I'll do the best I can to give you the most input possible and make your journey in Sanctuary just a little bit more comfortable. And this build is something I think every sorcerer should try, especially when patch 1.1 comes out, because we're getting tons of buffs. Hydra is going to be better. Chain Lightning is looking good. But for me, it's Conjuration right now. It's tons of fun, and I think you'll like it too. So, catch you guys in the next one. Much love.
wouldn't have made it without you.
Wouldn't have made it without you.